Ooh, good morning, guys. So I thought I'd talk about a new paper published on gentrification because it illuminates some theories about whether gentrification is good or bad and whether they're right or wrong. But of course, I'm talking about this while Trump is currently on a rally and they're telling Senator Ilhan Omar to send her back home, which, anyway, you dice it, is terrifying and slightly slimy. And I know I always use kind of historical backdrops for any of my references, but if you have the chance, you should go look at old Hitler speeches. They probably may be removed off YouTube by this point in 2019, which is too bad because as a historian, they're great primary sources. And if you go and listen or watch his speeches and then read the captions, because you're probably like me, who doesn't speak a lick of German, his speeches are interesting. They're interesting in that the man isn't scary. What's scary is the crowd. You'll notice in all his speeches, the man is relatively articulate, and he never says anything too damning, I suppose is the word. He never says anything too excessively derogatory. And then he'll be rising to the occasion, drawing up the crowd, speaking powerfully. And if you watch enough clips, you'll see suddenly the crowd will shift. And you'll hear somebody shout, "The Jews!" And that's where you get the inkling of something bad to come. It's not the speech itself, but the crowd. The crowd knows what the man's talking about, even if the man doesn't reference it specifically. And when crowds start to say stuff like "send her home," "send her back home" when she's an American citizen, that's a yikes from me. But okay, let's talk about this paper on gentrification. The study was funded by the Federal Reserve, which is an interesting choice for funding of a study on gentrification. But I think we can say there's relatively less or not very much bias in that funding coming from the Federal Reserve of Philadelphia influencing the researchers in any way. And to summarize quickly what they found was that, honestly, the jury is still out on the effects of gentrification, and that in reality, two things happen. We just imagine our general conception of gentrification. The low-income families and tenants that are living in a neighborhood when higher incomers move in don't often actually leave that neighborhood. What happens is that the owners of the property end up converting, adding more layers, adding more floors, double building on what were parking lots. Generally, there's enough space that what happens is more buildings get built or more rooms get built to occupy the larger demand for tenancy. And that often the lower income people aren't pushed out. Now, there's an exception that the ultra low income do get pushed out. Those are the ones that have the highest out migration, is what they call it. So if you imagine a distribution, the very tail end of those that are in the hyper low income, which actually isn't that common, it's the kind of lower middle low income, those people remain relatively unaffected in terms of out migration. It's only the extremely poor. Now, that can be a sad story in and of itself. But beyond that, they don't find too much out-migration. With the in-migration of higher income or different socioeconomic backgrounds into a new neighborhood, gentrifying it, what happens is that the neighborhood on the whole actually improves, and that the lower income people, the people on average that are living there, benefit from the new improved tax brackets, services that come in, improved garbage, improved water, improved electricity, sometimes, improved internet services, and that the neighborhood actually blends together relatively well. So it seems like on face value that the thesis that gentrification is just purely bad and disrupts neighborhoods and changes, the way of life for lots of people isn't true. Now, the research paper does hedge their bets quite a bit and says this is really just further discussion. There needs to be more research done on the subject. They also talk briefly about children that grow up in neighborhoods that were quickly gentrifying during their kind of adolescence. And they found that the effects on the children actually tend to be positive. They tend to not fall to poverty later in life. They tend to have higher education attainment. And they tend to be more employed. And that because the neighborhood is gentrifying, it exposes children to higher opportunities. And that there's more intergenerational economic mobility. All of these net slight positives. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. I just want to bring this study to light. It's very underreported. I find it a fascinating study because it kind of contradicts a lot of our prevailing ideas about gentrification and how gentrification should be opposed. the kind of, not in my backyard, NIMBYs, people that hate when any sort of change happens to a neighborhood. That one, a neighborhood is a system like anything else, and that change is inevitable. And two, there's a little bit of hubris of mankind, and that just as we assume any change is bad, that's not often the case. That each changing neighborhood in gentrification is its own system, and some can have adverse effects, but on the whole, they tend to be a net positive. I'll source the study down below for you guys to take a read over. Anyway, enjoy your morning. Click around for another video. Like, subscribe if you found this interesting. See you guys tomorrow. Bye.